All right, this is us. I will let the guys introduce themselves. Jonathan, you got a hall pass. I know you flew many hours to get here. If you have to sit down or risk falling down, then it's fine. So these are our Twitter handles. We want you to keep this conversation going. We will answer questions throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year. So here's how you shout at us, and we will get back to you. I'll let the guys introduce themselves. First of all, who was in Tony's session just now on his Courier and Irena's session? Yes, don't want to leave you out. It was awesome. Okay, all right. So not as many as I thought were going to be, because I didn't want to bore you with all the same information. They did an awesome deep dive on Courier and Kubernetes. Okay, so you can start from the beginning, because apparently no one was in it. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, so my name is Antonio Saura Puimedon, but to shorten it, it's fine like this. And I'm the Courier PTL. Courier was a project that started actually in the OpenStack Israel day 2 years ago. I met with Gal Sagi, and we started like, oh, this networking thing, we should do something about it. And the thing is about bringing OpenStack services to Kubernetes. We believe that the OpenStack community did an excellent job at getting very good abstractions, and the vendors did an even better job to get implementations with their products and good support and so on. So almost all the people here have some cloud that they are running, and they are using some vendors. And the idea is that when they will want to move to containers with Kubernetes or Docker and so on, that they will be able to leverage all that vendor relationship that they already have.
Hello, my name is Sergey Koren. I'm production architect at LivePerson. I'm actually a guy who's brought both OpenStack and Kubernetes into our infrastructure as an idea. I've been able to sell it, and actually it's a whole point to have it happen. The reason I went with both of them, it's ability to get more from less, and this is something I very like from my nature. I think we are successful in both ways. Okay, let's talk later about this, so we'll see how it goes.
And I'm Jonathan Bryce. I work at the OpenStack Foundation and worked at Rackspace back when we launched OpenStack. I've been doing cloud for a while, and have been spending a lot of time working with different users as they have been figuring out their container strategy. Kubernetes is without a doubt I would say the leader in terms of people who are trying to build out advanced container infrastructure on top of OpenStack and even outside of that. So a lot of overlap between the communities that has been awesome to see. And also, what's awesome to see? Kobe, finally, you're not in the limelight. You're got to pick on Kobe. But LivePerson has been one of those pioneering users, both with OpenStack and Kubernetes, that's been very willing to talk about what they do and share their stories.
Thanks, guys. My name is LisaMarie Namphy. Most people call me Lisa. I run the OpenStack user group for the San Francisco Bay Area, have been for about 4 years. It's the largest OpenStack user group because it was the first, and it's in the Bay Area, and we got, lucky enough to get meetup.com/OpenStack. So if you want to follow us and join our user group, we tend to live broadcast, stream, Google Hangout, whatever, all of our meetups. And if we can't do it live, we record them, because your time zone is challenging, as I'm finding out, for ours. So we have a YouTube channel also, and almost all of our meetups are recorded and put on there. So please join our community as well. There's tons of good content that comes out of there. I'm also the US OpenStack ambassador, so if you're thinking of starting a user group, I don't believe there's an OpenStack ambassador for Israel, or they would be here. So I work very closely with Marton Kiss from Hungary, and the other ambassadors. There's about 12 of us around the world. And I work really closely with the foundation because of that. I asked these folks to be on this panel specifically because of their diverse roles and their diverse opinions. So you guys, I hope you don't agree on everything. I hope we can have an interesting conversation and you challenge each other as well as me. I've run, I think, 13 meetups on Kubernetes since last summer. So I've basically morphed the OpenStack user group to the OpenStack and Containers user group. We threw a few Docker meetups in there too, just to keep everybody happy in my hometown. Huge Warriors fan, if you didn't get that already. And we'll be around all day, so happy to chat with everybody about anything. And I want to thank these guys for agreeing to do this last minute, because it was kind of last minute, so thanks, guys. Okay, so let's start with Jonathan, because you were on stage this morning, and because you're holding the mic, does not work out well. You showed us a slide this morning saying, I think it was from the user survey, saying 45% of the folks that answered that question anyway are running Kubernetes on OpenStack. What do you think that means in the big picture, and what are the use cases that you're seeing the most come up?
Yeah, so that slide was based off of the most recent user survey, actually the most recent 2 user surveys. It averaged the data together from the 2 recent user surveys. And basically we asked the question, which of these container or platform technologies are you running on top of your OpenStack environment right now? So it's a real world, what are you running now, not what are you interested in or what would you like to run in the future? And of the people who answered that, 45% said Kubernetes, around 20% said OpenShift, which is also Kubernetes-based. Cloud Foundry was around that level as well. And that was reasonably consistent with what we saw 6 months ago. And also, I think ties very closely to what we hear from, on a regular basis from OpenStack users. In terms of what they're running in those environments, it really has been extremely interesting to see the kinds of workloads that people are deploying in that mode. We have a user here, so we should let him speak in a minute. But I'll tell you that one of the really interesting keynotes that we had in Boston was eBay. I mentioned them earlier this morning and talked a little bit about their scale. But they have one of the largest production OpenStack environments in the world. They also have, on top of that, one of the largest production Kubernetes environments in the world. And within their Kubernetes environment, one of the key things that they are doing is artificial intelligence for machine learning and deep learning. They are actually using Kubernetes on top of OpenStack Ironic with 22,000 cores. Many of those are GPUs to do a variety of machine learning workloads for their business. I think that what I would say the trend that we've seen is that, if I go back 5 years with early adopters of OpenStack, what we saw were a lot of greenfield applications being deployed on OpenStack. Now we're at the point where we see users who are moving workloads off of VMware or workloads off of in-house management systems onto OpenStack. And I would say that 5 year ago point is kind of where we are with Kubernetes, where people are, as they spin up new workloads, as they want to give their developers new tooling for CI/CD and for the next wave of applications they're building, they're giving them Kubernetes environments for those kinds of applications. But that sort of lends itself to data analytics, machine learning, and also the other area that I would say we've seen kind of production Kubernetes on top of OpenStack usage is around mobile applications. Now, we have Tony here from Courier, so I'm going to point out one thing that I think has been a driver of Kubernetes on top of OpenStack adoption, and that is specifically the network integration that we have between Kubernetes through Courier to OpenStack networking has actually enabled a lot of regulated users to be able to make use of this technology for the first time. Containers have huge advantages in terms of agility and speed, but if you need to secure them, if you need to pass network audits, the network stacks for container-only network stacks are not super robust yet. But when you can tie that into an OpenStack networking framework along with something like OpenContrail or any number of networking backends that OpenStack supports, then you can pass all of the audits that you need to and meet all the security requirements you need to. And so we've actually seen an acceleration in like the financial services industry, for instance, where people are able to get to production more quickly with containers when they build it on top of OpenStack. ADP, I don't know if you guys have heard of ADP, but they're basically the biggest payroll company in the world. And in the US, they manage a very large percentage of the paychecks that go out to workers. And so, you know, they have to meet all of the finance regulations, all the finance requirements. They're a big Docker marquee customer, but they run that on top of OpenStack primarily for the networking piece, because they went through and they had the OpenStack networking audited, validated, tested, monitored, and trusted. And when it came time to do containers, they knew that they couldn't go through that whole thing again without putting a big delay in the system. So, you know, the kind of work that Courier does for networking and that, you know, the other tools in OpenStack do, I think have been a big driver for kind of accelerating adoption among a lot of different users.
Okay, Jonathan just answered about 8 of the questions I was going to ask, but I do hope we get to talk about security
Efficiency.
a little
Containers
bit later.
are
There you
about
go.
efficiency.
Just, we're done. Actually, why don't you pass the mic to Tony? We're going to save the best for last. We do have a user up here. That's a special thing. So, but Tony is the PTL of Courier, as Jonathan mentioned. And just show of hands, who here knows what Courier means? Okay. What does it mean? Yes,
That's
correct.
yes.
Little known fact. Go, and I'll let you explain. And for everyone that didn't hear, it actually means courier
It's
in Czech.
It's Courier. It just the spelling in Czech is much more beautiful than in English, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, and I was
courier.
waiting for a package that day that I had to name it from a courier, so that's it.
I love how these projects get named. They all have a story. So anyway, as the PTL of Courier, why did you guys start this project? Why is it so important? And for those that missed your session, you know, but really quickly, what is it?
Right. So 2 years ago, basically, we were at the point that Kubernetes was not like big, and Docker at the moment had most of the spotlight, but its networking was just bridges. There were some startups like Weave and so on trying to do something about it, but most of them were wrapping the Docker command line, or some even wrapping the API. And we thought that's kind of, and nobody liked that anyway. So Docker started a group to get that into a formal API that they could use for network, and they named it Container Network Model, and the library it's called libnetwork. So we set ourselves to expose. There were a lot of people interested. There was people that are no longer there, like IBM, but they were interested into leveraging their neutral networking with Docker containers. And it goes from the simplest use case as for example, I want to go and check something happening in a network of Neutron. So I will just, instead of starting a VM and so on, I'll just start a container from one of my computers and check what's going on, to just really running a whole bunch of applications that will be able to connect to services that are already on OpenStack. And that started the things with libnetwork. Then we had a brief period of time that we didn't have the data that Jonathan pointed out of everybody's going with Kubernetes. So we were for a while like, so we should do Mesos next, or we should do Kubernetes next. And what we found out was that the affinity between the Kubernetes and the OpenStack community is much higher than with any other of the solutions, even Docker itself. So we moved our efforts to Kubernetes, and a lot of people showed up saying, hey, yeah, I would really like to do that. I have this these workloads running on OpenStack, and what I really want to do next, because I'm hiring people and all the developers are saying we want to work with microservices due to all the advantages that they bring, and then naturally, like it became to pass that we wanted to allow them to move faster to Kubernetes in this way, because they, as Jonathan said, and I can verify because I was at a telecom security company once upon a time, that if you have to go through some certification, your beard can turn white. So and now we're at the point that people also think, okay, so we also want to bring the storage, and there's an effort going on this week, last week started also, that we have Fushi, that it brings the storage, Cinder and Manila to Docker, not yet to Kubernetes, but there is also that we saw in the OpenStack Summit, the Cinder people, John Griffith, wanting to do that. So we got together and we will make a Golang driver for getting to Cinder, hopefully also to Manila, and help them get faster into Kubernetes that way.
Okay, very good. And as Sergey mentioned earlier, doing more with less. Sergey's been with OpenStack, very early adopter, and one of the early adopters on Kubernetes. So from an ops or a user standpoint, why did you decide Kubernetes was the technology you wanted to adopt?
As I remember, the requirement to get the OpenStack first came from our inability to be agile, to bring infrastructure to applications. So as soon as I was able to show in the Cactus the ability to bring 5, 10 servers in a minute was wow, but second question was, where is the GUI? Actually, if anybody remember this time, there was no GUI to Kubernetes, to OpenStack here. And it was exactly the time that microservices was grown up, and it was exactly a match when they could be able to bring a lot of compute power into segregation of microservices which came from. After like several years, you understand that why OpenStack is not enough for you. It's just because you got in a lot of trees. It's a microservice, we have dozens, maybe hundreds on our application, and here you have another challenge. Here comes Kubernetes, which is focused to bring application management, not infrastructure management. That's the whole point. That's the differentiation we have. And why we go together, because we have expertise here and the ability to bring now Kubernetes here as quickly as possible. So together, we got to the situation that we could answer two requirements, to get infrastructure and the application playing together and quickly. Today, we have, if we are talking about number of instances of separate applications, it's thousands. And Kubernetes is actually also sort of a good practice how to live in this sort of environment when you have so many moving parts. It's something also together put all this infrastructure together, make it make sense. Regarding all these steps, we began with Kubernetes before GA. It was the point that...
You want to start early.
Yes, of course, because I could explain why. We have a lot of traffic. We have a lot of data coming to our data centers. So we could say, okay, we have 3 billion unique users coming to our networking. So when you go to how you make it profitable, you need to be able to be very agile. The second, to be very cautious how you manage it to make it make sense in terms of money. And you look for something that you get your advantage. So you got, okay, this is it. This is a way you could make it more efficient. And as soon as you have this efficient, something that sells in our companies, that's why it happens. So after you sell it, you could go and say, okay, here you got this and this advantages, how the way you could change the way you bring applications, so let's go. So that's the way.
If Sergey could wrestle down Cactus, I think he can handle Kubernetes at this point. It's a steep learning curve, but it's worth it, definitely. So
I would like to contest
sure.
just one small thing that you said, that Kubernetes is made for applications more than infrastructure, and I wanted to bring out a bit of effort that is going on in the community to make it also for infrastructure. So what I like to call the Kubernetes OpenStack Sandwich. That you have Kubernetes, then OpenStack, and then Kubernetes. Like, there's a lot of work that needs to happen there. Like, we should make OpenStack services, much more application like that. For example, that you could check its health by Kubernetes probes and so on. And I think that once we have that, the cost of operating an OpenStack cloud and then having Kubernetes on top will be reduced very significantly.
I agree with you. It's a point of focus. For us, focus is important to bring an application first to get their ability to run and manage application in the most efficient manner. And then we could make optimization how we manage infrastructure. So that's why we're going this way. So I hope we get somewhere in the point you are talking about.
Yeah. This is why it's really important also to talk to the users and talk to the ops people who are actually out there doing this in the real world, because we tend to get really, like we've run that exact meetup, but we have people internally presenting it, and I loved that guy's slide earlier about the Kubernetes hype. And I don't know, for those of you that follow me on Twitter saw that I had a little fun with it. And I said, yeah, we're going to be part of the problem. We're going to hype it even more in a few hours this afternoon. But it's really true. What does it take for something to be enterprise grade? What does it mean to actually get mainstream? Because when I was still at HP, we had a lot of customers who were looking into doing this, and a few who were actually doing this. But a lot were like, OpenStack is 7 years in, right? Kubernetes is not where OpenStack is now by any means. It's still having some of the very same growing pains that we have experienced for the last 7 years. And the session I did in Boston was kind of lessons learned from OpenStack. And I talked to the Kubernetes team, and I think Jonathan does all the time. So why don't you guys, and whoever wants to take the question, talk about what would it take to really make this mainstream or enterprise grade? Like, who's going to build the services? Who's going to support this? Who's going to do all of the, security and the stuff you guys talked about?
Personally, I don't think there's any such thing as enterprise grade. I think that's a construct of the 90s.
For enterprises to adopt this in mass.
The enterprises that can't figure out how to adopt these technologies are not going to exist in another 5 years. And so I think that it's sort of a red herring to throw around. But, yes, security has to be there. And you have to have some level of monitorability and operability. But I do think that a lot of the stuff that gets thrown out there as enterprise grade is sort of a red herring. So I'll throw that out there and then hand it off to Tony, who seems to have a...
I wanted to point out that, a lot of the projects that people use to deploy OpenStack nowadays, they are looking into the containers. So there's going to be both upstream for the people that have a team in-house that can handle that will be able to use OpenShift Ansible that has been using containers like C for a long time. Then there is Cola with Cola Kubernetes. There's also companies and enterprises using that. Then we have OOO that is moving now to containers, and then probably also on to Kubernetes. And that's at the level of deploying OpenStack on top. And there is OpenStack Helm also mainly from AT&T people. And I think that all those efforts are nicely getting together in the forum spaces, in the summit, and so on, to find out which are the components that will make it viable for those companies that are more conservative into going and bringing this containerized OpenStack environment to production.
I would agree with John, actually, because initially when we were talking about enterprise, we were talking about scale, and it changed dramatically for the last decade. And now it's more when we say enterprise is more like what regulation your product supports, so I could buy it as is and use it as is. If you look at the modern world, there are more and more web applications, web companies. They are doing things at scale and much scale, and many enterprises could achieve it. But they're not obligated to many of regulations that banks or other companies should be to apply. So this kind of guys, they need to buy to be sure to play with Lego and to get something that still works well with all the requirements they have to the other internal infrastructure. So this sort of companies, meaning that they say enterprise, I believe what happens, and I've seen it several times, it comes vendor, which begin to make some changes, some plugin or something that could make it regulation ready, and then you could sell it to additional niches like banks. Okay, but technically I agree with you. Enterprise as a term, it's something that changed a lot over the decade. So I would use very carefully.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think the word niche here is very important because like the telecommunications and the banking and so on, they have special requirements, but most of the enterprises don't, and they are perfectly right on that.
So who is going to be the, and we talked about this a little before, who's going to be the Mirantis of Kubernetes or the Nebula or Piston, and should there be, of Kubernetes? Or, or maybe talk about the distros that are out there. I think Red Hat has something with OpenShift, and there's, CoreOS has the Tectonics thing, and I think IBM has something, and there's a few Rancher. Is that a good thing for Kubernetes, or is that scaring people?
Okay, for me personally, I used to think that CoreOS, they may be like Mirantis here, but after some thinking, I decided that also because how it was born, I think the Google and Google Cloud is a Mirantis. Why? Because they are the way how they show the best practice how you could run Kubernetes and scale the best way, including the OpenStack. So I think the others just trying to copy out the way how they do it on their service. That's what I think. Maybe because they were first, because they developed it in the first place. I don't know, maybe they have this head start, but I think about them as the example to go and see how it could be.
So when I spoke this morning, I showed a graph that showed kind of the technology development phase and then the user adoption curve that spikes up a lot. And that's how, I mean, you can look at any open source technology, almost any technology, but especially open source technologies, because there has to be a phase where the community forms up, really figures out how it's going to work together, how it's going to do software development, and then it has to produce. And then at that point, there's something that's usable for people besides, Sergey, who are really brave and get in early. But if you look at that technology development phase, that is fed by companies who are making big bets early on in a technology. So, your question, you had a multi-part question. You said, who's going to be the Mirantis? Is there going to be one? Is it good? All of those questions are, I think, yes, there will be multiple Mirantises, Pistons, Nebulas of Kubernetes. Ultimately, yes, it will be good. Ultimately, most of them will get bought or go out of business. But the thing that's great about open source is that all of that collective investment that happens along the way ends up being available for everyone to use over the long term. And that is the difference between open source startups and proprietary startups. If you look at some of the companies who started early on, spent a lot of money on OpenStack development, and then went out of business or got bought, you could look at that and you could say, well, they didn't succeed. But the reality is that they were contributing to something that we all use now and that we all benefit from still. If they were proprietary companies, if that was all locked up inside of an Apple or a Microsoft, then yes, it just disappears from the world. But with open source, it means that it actually furthers the progress of the community as a whole. And I think if you look at Kubernetes, you mentioned Weave earlier, Heptio, there are, yes, CoreOS with Tectonic. There are already, I would say at least 10 to 15 kind of companies who are placing big bets solely around Kubernetes. And they're pouring money into the development, and they're jockeying for position in the community. Not all of them are going to survive. That's okay. What matters is that the technology that gets developed over the next 2 or 3 years during that ramp-up phase is going to be around for all of us to benefit from. So I think that is one of the things that people miss sometimes when they look at open source technologies and they try to look at it the way that they might have looked at Sybase versus Oracle 20 or 30 years ago. It's a different world in open source. So yes, there will be Mirantises. Yes, it will be a good thing, but no, they won't all make it, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, okay, go ahead, Tony, and then another question.
Yeah, I wanted to say that as technology evolves, and I think we're getting a step closer to most people being like live person. It's live person, right? The name? I get confused about it sometimes. All right. So that people will be able to run the things by themselves and so on. Now we're at the point, as Jonathan said, that there's a lot of startups placing the bets on Kubernetes. And the good thing is that quite a lot of them are doing the things in the open source way. And as such, they are helping in all the Kubernetes special interest groups to drive the whole thing forward. So maybe KubeNet is not the thing that people should be running, but a lot of companies are helping drive the Kubernetes networking anyway, and having then their add-on. And then on the other side, I think it's also important that the companies that build on top, that they also contribute to Kubernetes. If it's everything open source, like we have, for example, with OpenShift, all the better. But at the end of the day, the important thing is that they do it in a way that then fits back into Kubernetes, like with the role-based access. Now it's coming with the security context that is also coming from the community, and that that they involve themselves with the special interest groups and with the OpenStack community if it's some integration, so that we'll not end up in a place that each vendor has their separate, completely vendorized thing that it's not interoperable.
Yeah, no, that's a like best case scenario. And did you have a question on that? Okay. That is freaking the Google people out too. I talk to them a lot, and they're like the forks out there. They are just like, what are we gonna do? Yeah.
About bribery, just want to mention that it's not like me. It's because there are people in a live person who are able to follow, like to believe in an idea and to make it happen. And we have more than one people here, and I'd like to Liran, Kobe, Diana, people who knows to take their risks and make things happen. That's a whole point here.
Yeah. So I was.
Just a sec.
Okay.
I wanted to about what he said to be careful with the forks and due to the fast movement. I wanted to say that I think that with Kubernetes, due to the fast pace, the thing that you have to do is if you want to build something on top and add things, what you should be doing is to do it in the community and in parallel. Maybe you can, since we have this concept in Kubernetes of the beta APIs and third-party objects, you can maybe work in parallel, like offer something that can be used and can be tried on, and then consolidate into the final aspect. This is something that in the network special interest group happens a lot. That there's a lot of discussion then when we come together a bit. I'm not very active there, but they really do a lot that say, okay, 2 or 3 people from different companies go make a POC, and maybe it's something that they already have tried with their own implementation, and then finally it ends up part of the API.
That's how open source is supposed to work. Yes. I hope someone tweeted out what Jonathan said earlier about the good thing about open source. I mean, this is out there for us to use, for us to contribute to. So the cool thing, Kubernetes is run a little bit different than the OpenStack model, because the CNCF is very different than the OpenStack Foundation, or maybe the CNCF relationship with the technology is a little bit different than the OpenStack Foundation with the technology. So can you talk a little bit about how you work with the CNCF, or do you work with the CNCF?
Sure, yes. I assume you're looking at me.
I am, because I don't often have someone from the foundation on the same stage as me.
Yeah, so the OpenStack Foundation came about after a set of OpenStack projects had been developed for about 2 years. And so the OpenStack Foundation, and we actually looked at possibly putting them into other foundations that were out there, but at that point, 2 years into it, there were a number of OpenStack projects. There was a definite community of thousands of people that had gathered around it, and it seemed like people wanted to have a home that was focused on the OpenStack technology, and that was when we started the OpenStack Foundation. But it was really kind of an extension of the existing governance bodies that were at work within OpenStack, and then moving them fully independent out of Rackspace. The CNCF is a little bit different because it was sort of set up as a almost more of like a holding company or something for Kubernetes plus other open source projects to be determined that have come in since then, and so the CNCF I think is almost more conceptual in what it manages. Kind of the landscape of cloud native tools versus being involved directly in any of the specific projects and technologies that live underneath it. And it's not to say that it's worse or better than how OpenStack is set up, but it is a little bit different. What we've heard from some users is they have been trying to figure out, like I mentioned earlier, how do they use all of these technologies together? And I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to work with the CNCF and the Cloud Foundry Foundation and OPNFV and a lot of these other foundations. Because when you talk to LivePerson or AT&T or eBay or whoever, they don't look at their data center as a single technology stack. They have a lot of different things that they depend on to deliver value to their customers and for their business. And so I think that one of those myths to me that goes around is that Amazon is out innovating everyone. And I think that is actually just flat out false. Because you can take any piece of functionality that is available in AWS, and you can find equivalent or better functionality in the open source world. But the difficulty is that it is sometimes easier to get that functionality from AWS than it is from the open source projects. And I think that is where, as open source foundations and as open source communities, where we're failing and where we need to do better. Amazon isn't out innovating, but they are out integrating the open source options. So this has been a big kind of passion of mine over the last year. I want to make sure that all of these communities are working together and integrating well, because we are actually doing more than any of the big hyperscale cloud providers. We're just not making it as easy to consume the technology from these open source alternatives. So yeah, but where it gets difficult is we're all set up a little differently, we all work a little differently, and as a user, you go in and you have to figure out how to navigate these different landscapes. And I think that's actually on us as community leaders and as foundations to sort of solve that over the long term.
Okay. Maybe another question for Sergey in terms of, because you're building this right now, and in the early days of OpenStack, I remember when I was at HP, we had worked closely with the foundation to prove that we, were using Nova, Neutron, and all these things that we had to use in order to get the big logo that said powered by OpenStack. Kubernetes doesn't seem to be operating the same way. It seems to be kind of decoupling this technology, right, with Containerd or maybe Rancher. Do you think that's a good thing? Is that beneficial for you? How do you, when you're building these things, how do you see this?
Okay. It's a good question.
I didn't let
if you-
these guys know what I was going to ask them beforehand, so it'll keep it interesting for you.
Actually, I could say that historically, what we did when we began also with OpenStack, we chose a partner that could let us to make some order in the house. So we went with Ubuntu as a delivery partner, which just help us to get together the parts we need to instead to be able to be available essentially to get something working. So well, as soon as we get some experience, we got understanding how things work. It was less important, but still it was like a reference implementation for something we need. Regarding Kubernetes, here the same way we got something referenced. It was good for Kubernetes and the first day. It was something that really works, and it was delivered maybe actually a lot, but we wanted to have. That's why it was so easy to understand that it was something we got to go with. It was answering the questions how to deliver application, not to care about its stability and the deliverability at scale. And it's something we looked for, it's something we got. And going forward, just looking and see it, just developing and evolving in the way we want to. Still, how we do it, and we did it initially in OpenStack, we chose our enemy, okay? We get something specific we wanted to solve, something we could give some specific or very clear win for what we need to. For example, for Kubernetes, we chose that this is our way to get in the cloud, the way that we don't need to learn a specific cloud how to manage it, but to get application working there through. And this is a way we say, okay, Kubernetes is the answer to the way to get it. And don't talk about some others, pluses and minuses we could get there, but it's something that just focuses us to get the delivery. That's it. If you answer the question, do you think, or you?
I think
Guys,
so.
do you need some more information maybe about what I?
I think so. And Jeremy, I'm not sure what time. Okay. Okay. Oh wow. Okay.
So I got okay. I could give another example about Kubernetes. It's also as we began to go. You know, it's something that it knows to work very closely and gives very specific requirements to how to manage network. And that's when we get there. It was the first time that we needed to make more collaboration with the networking team to make it actually happen. And actually, from our side, it made them push to understand better how they could get into environment, which was pretty something new for them. Because OpenStack actually we were able to bring it up without involving them out in a networking team, because OpenSwitch knows to make some isolation between the layers. So here it's not the case. It's something that pushes all the company to get something else, and still we could make it first choices to make it working as smooth as possible in the way we have. Just we need to get the first winners. We need to get to create a case which is clear for everybody that you have value, and then you could go ahead and to do something else.
Okay, and I heard a lot of mumbling when Jeremy said we have until 5. I assume you were all just changing your dinner reservations and pushing everything back a little bit, right? But I actually want to ask you guys some questions. I was really shocked earlier. I think it was the gentleman from Amdocs presenting who asked if anybody was actually running a container in production, and I turned around and didn't see one hand go up. Were you guys all just snoozing, or is anybody here actually running a container in production? Okay, so there are some. I couldn't believe that there was no one in the room. You must have just been on the other side of the room. Okay, well, that's good. And do we have mostly, show of hands, who here is, would you consider yourself an operator? OpenStack operator? User? Developers? Okay, users, developers? And everybody else is what? Okay.
Evaluating?
Okay, so you're here for some reason. What do you want to know about Kubernetes? Is there a burning question? I didn't see anyone tweet at me, so I'll check it again. But is there a question that anyone has?
I will play Mic Runner. Anybody have any questions?
I think there's one over here. Okay,
Yeah.
over here.
Adam? Okay, Adam Spears, ladies and gentlemen.
So this one is about the the sandwich, the Kubernetes on OpenStack on Kubernetes, or specifically the bottom layer of the sandwich. I haven't been following what's going on there too closely. Could you summarize what ongoing efforts are there to kind of convert OpenStack from being a sort of pet workload that doesn't really suit running on containers to one that is more cattle-like and does work nicely on containers?
And I suspect there'll be more than one answer to this question.
Sure.
So that's an awesome question. Like I said, we've run a meetup. We ran conflicting meetups two weeks in a row of, underlay, overlay, all that fun stuff.
Maybe the first, does anybody have any idea what they're talking about when they say Kubernetes Sandwich? Okay, a couple
Anybody that isn't a vendor or a Red Hat person.
So when you think about an OpenStack cloud, a lot of times you think about all of the automated resources out there where you run, live person workloads. And that might be hundreds or thousands of servers that are deployed and automated, and people make use of it. In order to have those hundreds or thousands of servers, you need a control plane, which is actually the OpenStack services themselves. And that might run on 5 or 10 or 15 servers, and then they control the rest of the environment. So the way that you run that control plane, historically in OpenStack, has been through config managed services, things with Ansible or Puppet or Chef, where you're managing a bunch of Python services to basically have a Nova service running, a Cinder service running, a Keystone service running. The Kubernetes Sandwich is that you think about that control plane, this is kind of what Adam was saying, as a microservice application, and you have all of those little OpenStack services containerized and then orchestrated using something like Ansible or Kubernetes, and so that gives you recoverability and theoretically better upgrades and those kinds of things. But one of the issues is that OpenStack is kind of interesting because from the beginning, OpenStack was built and designed as a lot of separate services. However, there were some kind of monolithic application type components to it with a single database server, a single message queue, some different things like that were not sort of what you might think of as highly distributed microservices. And the other piece that is missing from something that you might just want to be able to deploy as an application in Kubernetes is the health checks and the state awareness around what's running inside of Nova and how well it's running. So what's happened over the last I would say maybe 2 years is there's been an effort to take those OpenStack services and make them more easily deployable as containerized microservices that you can run in a lightweight footprint, that you can manage more easily, manage the full life cycle, not just the installation of it. And the oldest project inside of OpenStack that's kind of been oriented around this is called Kolla, which is Kolla. You might have heard this morning in the keynotes, the IDF talked about how they went with CentOS and Kolla as their deployment methodology. So what Kolla does is it creates a set of Docker images, and there's a version that you can use Ansible with, there's a version that you can use Kubernetes with to orchestrate those images and run them in the control plane. Kolla images have been around for a while. The way that Kolla looks at managing OpenStack is that a lot of the information that you need to run an OpenStack service ends up inside of that image, and they make decisions for you. So Kolla is actually a pretty quick way to get going with OpenStack, but it's a little bit more prescriptive than if you just run OpenStack on your own. So Kolla is, I would say, the most mature of the containerized ways of doing OpenStack in the community, but it's going to have some restrictions in terms of how you can customize and what you can do with it. I mean, they're container images, so you can rebuild them if you want, but you're doing a lot of that in the container images. Since Kolla came out, other people have looked and said, well, we want to containerize the control plane as well. We were talking about Mirantis earlier. Mirantis has a container project called Fuel CCP, which is sort of their next iteration of their fuel management tooling. And it is a little bit of a different approach than Cola in that they try to have less of the configuration data inside of the container image itself. And the other project that I think you mentioned, which really came out of AT&T and SAP, is called OpenStack Helm. How many of you have heard of Helm? Okay, so Helm is sort of a packaging tool within the Kubernetes community, and OpenStack Helm was another attempt to run the OpenStack services, but do it with lighter weight containers and have a lot of the configuration sit outside of the containers, so that you can modify what all goes into a container, how it works more easily. So those are kind of the three efforts right now. They all take slightly different approaches. As I said, Cola is probably the most mature, but it's still fairly early on for this. And I think that in 2017, we're seeing a lot of work around these projects. And so my guess is that in the next 12 months, we're probably going to see some, kind of collaboration emerge among these projects. It's actually already started to happen across OOO, Helm, Cola, and Fuel CCP. But I think we're going to probably get to some standards around how we manage the container image specifically and separate that from the management of it. But yes, over the long term, why this is important is, I was talking about edge computing earlier today. We have users of OpenStack who run massive data centers, but we also have users who want to run a massive number of OpenStack environments, in the thousands or tens of thousands of OpenStack environments. And when you're trying to think about how you might manage 10,000 different OpenStacks all over the globe, you can't think about it as a Puppet install for every one of those and a lift and shift upgrade for every one of those. So this is where containerizing that control plane becomes really important, where you can mix and match what services you need where, you can upgrade them relatively easily, and you can run them on very small devices that you might have as a network device in a Starbucks coffee shop, for instance. So which is, you laugh, but Verizon's actually doing this. They're doing a rollout right now in Starbucks in the US of these OpenStack boxes that are about this big. And so in order to get to that footprint, they've had to really trim down, what's really running in there. So this is why it's important and why so many different people are working on it. But I think it's, the next 12 months is where we're going to start to see some kind of coming together in the community around the approach.
Okay, that was awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. I did get a question from the audience. Then it's for Sergey. The question is, does the Moby project change how users evaluate their container strategy? Do you guys know what the Moby project is? It came out of Docker. Do you want to first explain what the Moby project
Yeah,
is?
sure.
Okay. Okay, I think we should first tell them what the Moby project is. It's a community edition that Docker is spinning out of Docker. It's going to be its own group, its own user group, its own everything.
Okay.
The container
okay.
runtime, yeah. And then I guess I can repeat the question. Sorry, now I've forgotten what the question was. Does the Moby project change how users evaluate their container strategy?
Not on this stage, of course. Definitely, again, the point was what's your purpose, what's your focus? And the focus here is to get application delivered. Now, the way how it's packaged, what you do it for, make it happen, it's not something that you currently focus. And actually, I believe that Kubernetes is a way to abstract as Docker, as implementation of Docker, how you run these things. And actually, that's exactly a point also why we looked for something which is not Docker, because we wanted to have something that make me be as far as possible for a specific implementation. And we get it. And as you know, Kubernetes itself, it's not only running Docker itself, it also you could run Rocket, for example. And that's why I feel safe, because I chose something that make me not to be tied to specific technology, but it bring me a methodology that I need to. Did I ask you okay?
Did that answer?
Is it answered?
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that the fact that the container runtime has been commoditized by the orchestration engines will reduce a lot the impact of such community efforts.
Okay, good. Okay, any other questions from the, I won't keep you till 5, don't worry. But any other questions for our panel or for me? Can you give him the mic, please? I think they're recording these things, so that's helpful.
In your experience, have you seen any companies that opted for an OpenStack solution based on VMs instead of based on bare metal? And if so, what was the reasoning behind it? Because it doesn't seem very efficient at first glance.
And add Kubernetes to that too, because people at Google are running VMs in containers.
Containers and VMs.
Containers, yes, they're, yeah.
Yes, yeah, I mean, the bulk of OpenStack deployments use virtual machines. If you look at our user survey, something like 90+% of the deployments are running Nova, which is the virtualization service inside of OpenStack. In terms of why they do that instead of bare metal, it's really speed and agility. You know, bare metal, even automated, you're still looking at multiple minutes, 10, 12 minutes of startup time to take a machine and image it, and I mean that's if you've got it all optimized too. Whereas with virtual machines you're looking at seconds to 2 minutes basically. So if you're in a highly elastic environment and you want to really be able to give people a variety of images they can start up very quickly and run a workload, then virtual machines still give you that. Containers, they actually make that even faster. They make the startup times even lower. But, I think that people are still trying to figure out the security models and the network models and all those things with containers. So right now, virtual machines still by far are the most widely deployed model. Yeah, okay, Sergey's got it.
And think also about the ability to synchronize the purchasing way, how you manage your data center, and how you deliver actually CPUs to the who need it. Okay, actually, our cycle, for example, could be 2-3 months to deliver a rack of servers. But though you could get the requirement to get CPUs available within minutes. So as soon as you have this, the way how you separate, the way they work, you could manage differently your resources you need to. Of course, you need to get the guesses how much CPUs you will need in 2-3 months. But actually, when you get it, and you have methodology how to manage data center, you separate it, you disconnect it from a delivery of CPU itself to your customer. That's the whole point. That's why we went with this, and that's what we get, okay? For example, besides this, the getting a speed in the server of VM, as John said, it's within minutes. So actually, I could say when we get end-to-end availability to bring application using OpenStack to get new machines and using Puppet to deploy applications, we suddenly got the ability to get application scale to make it 300-500% within minutes, and still it was separated from other people who were used to install servers and bring in data center management, etc. So that's the whole point, to make it different ports. And by the way, that's a Kubernetes way it shines, because you got application level management without any connection how you manage your CPUs. Exactly. So as soon as you get it, so you get separate word, separate tools to get this application managed. And it's another word. Suddenly you don't need to know what's going on on the server level to get application working. Okay, you don't need to know how server is called. It's a lot. It's a lot if you think about it. Okay.
Well, from the developer perspective, it happens a lot. Like we get a new guy in the team, and we want him to start working with Kubernetes. So it's much easier for us to just have a cloud that manages a lot of physical servers, and to fastly give him a few virtual machines, and then he can deploy his environments and then start developing on top of that. So the speed of management, like at some point, if you want to make everything as efficient as possible, maybe you will give some bare metal nodes to the Kubernetes, and you can manage that. But I'm not sure how often do you need that.
So contrary to popular belief, this is not the end of VMs as we know them. This is not going to be the death of VMware like everyone says.
And the last important point, I believe, that's more low, because now the model servers you got, it's 40, 50, 60 CPUs. In many cases, when you want to run your application, you need 5, 6. So technically speaking, speed of getting cores getting much quicker than your ability to consume them. So as soon as you synchronize and separate them, you got to do it, say, different things in a way how you manage it. Make it much more agile and make it sense.
Oh, more questions? Okay.
If I want to deploy a Kubernetes cluster inside an OpenStack environment, how do you guys recommend doing that?
Yeah, we kind of covered that a little bit. Do you want to just go through it really quickly, and then we can take the rest of it offline if you came in late?
I would advise you to connect with the guys from LivePerson. So just you got exactly hands-on experience and the possible way you get it. So but there are more than one option to do it. And you could choose what's better from our experience, what's better suits for you.
Yeah, it's going to depend on what you want your Kubernetes to look like. So there are, LivePerson's started doing it years ago, very early on. In the time between then, there have been other projects that have come out that sort of, take care of installing OpenStack or installing Kubernetes on top of OpenStack in certain ways. But it kind of depends on, do you want one big Kubernetes for your entire organization? Do you want a lot of small Kubernetes? Do you want different kinds of multi-tenant management? So it depends on what you want your Kubernetes to look like. But we can take it.
We had so many more questions for these guys. I don't know if there's a networking cocktail hour or something later, but I encourage you guys to come up and ask us more questions later. One of the questions you might talk to us later about is there anything you wouldn't run in a container? What shouldn't you put in a container environment? And that's always a fun one because you guys are probably all seen Jez Frizzell's presentation out on the internet about everything that she put in a container, including her PowerPoint and she runs her life from containers and has worked at Docker and Google now. So she's an expert. But one of the things I would have noticed from the user groups that we've run, the meetups that we've run, this isn't for enterprises only. Jonathan had a slide earlier showing you all of the different people that have adopted OpenStack and the sizes of companies, and it's so distributed. We thought at first this is just going to be for enterprises because that's who has the ops and that's who can support this, or they can get the support from whoever the cloud provider is. But we're finding that there is a steep learning curve, but once you get over that, it's worth it, Kubernetes. And we're seeing, companies of all sizes and adopt this technology. And another thing I would encourage you is don't try this at home. Kubernetes is actually really good, and I'm a big fan, and I don't work for Google, but I see people trying to build,
I run at home I have a Kubernetes running on my server, and I run my media center up there.
Yes, I don't mean don't try Kubernetes at home. I mean try Kubernetes at home. I mean don't fall into the trap of the not invented here, the old NIH trap, where we see companies just go, well, we're not going to use Kubernetes, we're going to build this ourselves. And what I'm saying is, you're probably just going to come back to Kubernetes and you will have wasted 6 months. I mean, Kubernetes is pretty good. So don't try to reinvent the wheel is what I'm saying. Use Kubernetes. You can ask Tony how to run your own Kubernetes from your living room. Any last
really
closing statements from our esteemed panel? Jonathan, you still awake down there? He's fallen. So I made him stand up.
I believe I've been here last year in an OpenStack meeting, and Kubernetes was one track, and nobody came there because it was something very new. And it's not the case, I believe, this kind of time because we already have panel about this. I really believe in the future of this specific technology. I feel safe at least for 3 years to go with it. We'll see what will happen later on. But what I love about it that it's also ecosystem and understanding how to do things better. And for example, for our case, We understood how we may monitor better our infrastructure using Prometheus. And all this stuff is coming to make us just much more proficient. That's for sure. Okay, let's see what's going on in the next year.
Closing remarks? Okay, then that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for coming. And keep the conversation going. This is how to find us.